Shalom and welcome back to Sister for Sister Story Time. I am your host and sister, her story, and ChayaFyah. Today we're reading Paradise Lost by John Milton, currently on the chapter or book 3, The Argument and the Perversion of Man. If you'd like to get the book for yourself, it is listed in the description box. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and donate to the channel. So, God, sitting on his throne, sees Satan flying towards this world, then newly created, shows him to the Son, who sat at his right hand, foretells the success of Satan in perverting mankind, clears his own justice and wisdom from all imputation, having creating man free and able enough to have withstood his tempter, yet declares his purpose of grace towards him in regard he failed not of his own malice, as did Satan, but by him seduced. The Son of God renders praises to his Father for the manifestation of his gracious purpose towards man. But God again declares that grace cannot be extended towards man without the satisfaction of divine justice. Man hath offended the majesty of God by aspiring to Godhead, and therefore with all his progeny devoted to death must die unless someone can be found sufficient to answer for his offense and undergo his punishment. The Son of God freely offers himself a ransom for man. The Father accepts him, ordains his incarnation, pronounces his exaltation above all. What is that? In heaven and earth commands all the angels to adore him. They obey, and hymning to their harps in full choir, celebrate the Father and the Son. Meanwhile, Satan alights upon the bare convex of this world's outermost orb, where wandering he first finds a place, since called the limbo of vanity. What persons and things fly up thither? Thence comes to the gate of heaven, described ascending by stairs, and the waters above the firmament that flow about it. His passage thence to the orb of the sun, he finds there Uriel, the regent of that orb, but first changes himself into the shape of a meaner angel, and pretending a realist desire to behold the new creation, and man whom God had placed here, inquires of him the place of his habitation, and is directed, alights first on Mount Nephates. Hail, holy light, offspring of heaven firstborn, or of the eternal co-eternal beam. May I express thee unblamed, since God is light, and never but in an unapproached light dwelt from eternity, dwelt then in thee. Bright effluence of bright essence increate, or hearest thou rather pure ethereal stream, whose fountain who shall tell? Before the sun, before the heaven thou wert, and at the voice of God, as with a mantle didst invest the rising world of waters dark and deep. One from the void and formless infinite, thee I revisit now with bolder wing, escaped the Stygian pool, though long detained in that obscure sojourn while in my flight. For the world was only in a state of fluidity when the light was created, as Moses says, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Void must not here be understood as emptiness, for chaos is described full of matter, but as destitute of any formed being. Through utter and through middle darkness, born with other notes than to the Orphean lyre, I sung of chaos and eternal night, taught by the heavenly muse to venture down the dark descent and up to reascend. Though hard and rare, thee I revisit safe, and feel thy sovereign vital lamp. But thou revisitest not these eyes that roll in vain to find thy piercing ray, and find no dawn. So thick a drop serene hath quenched their orbs, or dim suffusion veiled. Yet not the more cease I to wander, where the muses haunt clear spring, or shady grove, or sunny hill, smit with the love of sacred song. Bechief thee, Zion, and the flowery brooks beneath that wash thy hallowed feet, and warbling flow nightly I visit, nor sometimes forget those other two equaled me in fate. So were I equaled with them in renown, blind Thamyris and blind Maeonides, and Tarsius and Phineas, prophets old. Then feed on thoughts that voluntary move harmonious numbers, as the wakeful bird sings darkling, and in shadiest covert hid tunes her nocturnal note. Thus, with the year's seasons return, but not to me returns day, or the sweet approach of even or morn, or sight of vernal bloom, or summer's rose, or flocks, or herds, or human face divine. But cloud instead, and ever during dark surrounds me, from the cheerful ways of men cut off, and for the book of knowledge fair presented with a universal blank of nature's works to me expunged and raised, and wisdom at once entrance quite shut out. So much the rather thou, celestial light, shine inward, and the mind through all her powers irradiate. Their plant eyes, all mist from thence purge and disperse, that I may see and tell of things invisible to mortal sight. Now had the Almighty Father from above, from the pure empyrean where he sits high, thrown above all height, bent down his eye, his own works and their works at once to view, about him all the sanctities of heaven. Apollonius represents Orpheus making the creation out of chaos the subject of his muse. Thamyris is an early bard mentioned by Homer. Stood thick as stars, and from his sight received beatitude past utterance. On his right, the radiant image of his glory sat, his only son. On earth, he first beheld our two first parents, yet the only two of mankind. In the happy garden placed, reaping immortal fruits of joy and love, uninterrupted joy, unrivaled love, in blissful solitude, he then surveyed hell and the gulf between, and set Satan there, coasting the wall of heaven on this side night, in the dun air sublime, and ready now to stoop with wearied wings and willing feet on the bare outside of this world that seemed firm land without firmament, uncertain which, in ocean or in air, him God beholding from his prospect high, wherein past, present, future he beholds, thus to his only Son foreseeing spake. Only begotten Son, seest thou what rage transports our adversary, whom no bounds prescribe, no bars of hell, nor all the chains heaped on him there, nor yet the main abyss wide interrupt can hold? So bent he seems on desperate revenge that shall redound upon his own rebellious head. And now through all restraint broke loose, he wings his way, not far off heaven, in the precincts of light, directly towards the new created world, and man there placed, with purpose to essay if him by force he can destroy, or worse, by some false guile pervert, and shall pervert, for man will hearken to his glozing lies, and easily transgress the sole command, sole pledge of his obedience, so will fall he and his faithless progeny. Whose fault? Whose but his own? Ingrate, he had of me all he could have. I made him just and right, sufficient to have stood, though free to fall. Such I created all the ethereal powers and spirits, both them who stood and them who failed. Freely they stood who stood, and fell who fell. Not free, what proof could they have given sincere of true allegiance, constant faith or love, were where only what they needs must do appeared, not what they would. What praise could they receive? What pleasure I from such obedience paid, when will and reason also is choice, useless and vain, of freedom both despoiled. Made passive both had served necessity, not me. They therefore, as to right belonged, so were created, nor can justly accuse their maker, or their making, or their fate, as if predestination overruled their will. Disposed by absolute decree or high foreknowledge, they themselves decreed their own revolt, not I. If I foreknew, foreknowledge had no influence on their fault, which had no less proved certain unforeknown. So without least impulse or shadow of fate, or aught by me immutably foreseen, they trespass, authors to themselves in all, both what they judge and what they choose. For so I formed them free, and free they must remain, till they enthrall themselves. I else must change their nature and revoke the high decree unchangeable, eternal, which ordained their freedom. They themselves ordained their fall, the first sort by their own suggestion fell, self-tempted, self-depraved. Man falls deceived by the other first. Man therefore shall find grace. The other none. In mercy and justice both, through heaven and earth, so shall my glory excel. But mercy first and last shall brightest shine. Thus, while God spake, ambrosial fragrance filled all heaven, and in the blessed spirit select sense of new joy ineffable diffused. Beyond compare, the Son of God was seen most glorious. In him all his Father shone substantially expressed, and in his face divine compassion visibly appeared, love without end and without measure grace, which uttering thus he to his Father spake. O Father, gracious was that word which closed thy sovereign sentence, that man should find grace, for which both heaven and earth shall high extol thy praises, with the innumerable sound of hymns and sacred songs, wherewith thy throne and compass shall resound thee ever blessed. For should man finally be lost, should man thy creature late so loved, thy youngest son, fall circumvented thus by fraud, though joined with his own folly, that be from thee far, that far be from thee, Father, who art judge of all things made, and judgest only right. Or shall the adversary thus obtain his end and frustrate thine? Shall he fulfill his malice and thy goodness bring to naught, or proud return, though to his heavier doom, yet with revenge accomplished, and to hell draw after him the whole race of mankind by him corrupted? Or wilt thou thyself abolish thy creation, and unmake for him what for thy glory thou hast made? So should thy goodness and thy greatness both be questioned and blasphemed without defense. To whom the great Creator thus replied, O Son, in whom my soul hath chief delight, Son of my bosom, Son who art alone my word, my wisdom, and effectual might. All hast thou spoken as my thoughts are, all as my eternal purpose hath decreed. Man shall not quite be lost, but saved who will, yet not of will in him, but grace in me freely vouchsafed. Once more I will renew his lapsed powers, though forfeit and enthralled by sin to foul exorbitant desires. Upheld by me, yet once more he shall stand on even ground against his mortal foe. By me upheld, that he may know how frail his fallen condition is, and to me owe all his deliverance, and to none but me. Some I have chosen of peculiar grace, elect above the rest. So is my will. The rest shall hear me call, and oft be warned their sinful state, and to appease betimes the incensed deity, while offered grace invites. For I will clear their senses dark, what may suffice, and soften stony hearts to pray, repent, and bring obedience due to prayer, repentance, and obedience due. though but endeavored with sincere intent. Mine ear shall not be slow, mine eye not shut. And I will place within them as a guide my umpire conscience, whom if they will hear, light after light, well used they shall attain, and to the end persisting, safe arrive. This my long sufferance and my day of grace. They who neglect and scorn shall never taste, but humble on and deeper fall, and none but such from mercy I exclude, but yet all is not done. Man disobeying, disloyal, breaks his fealty, and sins against the high supremacy of heaven, affecting Godhead, and so losing all, to expiate his treason hath not left. But to destruction sacred heavenly powers, where shall we find such love? Which of ye will be mortal to those in all heaven charity so dear? He asked, but all the heavenly man's behalf, patron or intercessor, none appeared, much less that durst upon his own head draw the deadly forfeiture and ransom set. And now, without redemption, all mankind must have been lost, adjudged to death and held by doom severe, had not the Son of God, in whom the fullness dwells of love divine, his dearest mediation thus renewed. Father, thy word is passed. Man shall find grace, and shall grace not find means? That finds her way, the speediest of thy winged messengers, to visit all thy creatures, and to all comes unprevented, unimplored, unsought. Happy for man so coming. He her aid can never seek, once dead in sins and loss. Atonement for himself or offering meet, indebted and undone, hath none to bring. Behold me then, me for him, life for life I offer. On me let thine anger fall, account me man. I for his sake will leave thy bosom, and this glory next to thee, freely put off, and for him lastly die well pleased. On me let death wreak all his rage. Under his gloomy power I shall not long lie vanquished. Thou hast given me to possess life in myself forever. By thee I live, though now to death I yield, and am his due all that of me can die. Yet that debt paid, thou wilt not leave me in the loathsome grave his prey, nor suffer my unspotted soul forever with corruption there to dwell. But I shall rise victorious and subdue my vanquisher, spoiled of his vaunted spoil. Death, his death's wound shall then receive, and stoop inglorious of his mortal sting disarmed. I through the ample air in triumph high shall lead hell captive, maugre hell, and show the powers of darkness bound. Thou at the sight pleased out of heaven shalt look down and smile, while by thee raised I ruin all my foes. Death at last, and with his carcass glut the grave. Then with the multitude of my redeemed shall enter heaven long absent and return, Father, to see thy face within shall remain. but peace assured and reconcilement. Wrath shall be no more thenceforth, but in thy presence joy entire. His words here ended, but his meek aspect silent yet spake, and breathed immortal love to mortal men. So man, as his most just silent yet spake, and breathed immortal love to mortal men. All right, sorry about the interruption. Okay. His words here ended, but his meek aspect silent yet spake, and breathed immortal love to mortal men, above which only shone filial obedience. As a sacrifice glad to be offered, he attends the will of his great Father. Admiration seized all heaven, what this might mean, and whither tend wondering, but soon the Almighty thus replied, O thou, in heaven and earth, the only peace found out for mankind under wrath, O thou, my sole complacence, well thou knowest how dear to me are all my works, nor man the least, though last created, that for him I spare thee from my bosom and right hand, to save by losing thee awhile the whole race lost. Thou therefore, whom thou only canst redeem, their nature also to thy nature join, and be thyself man among men on earth, made flesh, when time shall be of virgin seed by wondrous birth. Be thou in Adam's room, the head of all mankind, though Adam's son, as in him perish all men, so in thee, as from a second root, shall be restored as many as are restored, without thee none. His crime makes guilty all his sons. Thy merit imputed shall absolve them who renounce their own both righteous and unrighteous deeds, and live in thee transplanted, and from thee receive new life. So man, as is most just, shall satisfy man, shall satisfy for man, be judged and die, and dying rise, and rising with him raise his brethren, ransomed with his own dear life. So heavenly love shall abolish hate so easily, and to when they may man's near the great volume, though the equal to God and equally enjoying God-like fruition, quitted all to save a world from all sin, and all men utter loss and has been found by merit more than birthright Son of God, found worthiest to be so by being good, far more than glory abounds. Therefore, thy humiliation throne. Here shalt thou sit incarnate. Here shalt reign both God and man, Son both of God and anointed universal King. All power I give thee, reign forever, and assume thy merits. Under thee as head supreme, thrones, princedoms, powers, dominions, I reduce. All knees to thee shall bow of them that bide in heaven or under earth in hell. And from thee send the summoning archangels to proclaim thy dread tribunal, thy sentence. Hell, her numbers full, thenceforth shall be forever shut. Some don't want me reading today, I guess. Okay. So hell, her numbers full, thenceforth shall be forever shut. Meanwhile, the world shall burn, and from her ashes spring new heaven and earth, wherein the just shall dwell, and after all their tribulations long shall see golden days, fruitful of golden deeds. With joy and love triumphing and fair by, for regal scepter then no more shall need, God shall be all in all. But all ye gods adore him who to compass all this dies, adore the Son and honor him as me. The sooner had the Almighty ceased, but all the multitude of angels with a shout, loud as from numbers without number, sweet as from blessed voices uttering joy, heaven rung with jubilee, and loud hosannas filled the eternal regions, lowly, reverent. Towards either throne they bow, and to the ground with solemn adoration down they cast their crowns, inwove with amaranth and gold. Immortal amaranth, a flower which once in paradise, fast by the tree of life, began to bloom, but soon for man's offense to heaven removed. Where first it grew, there grows and flowers aloft, shading the fount of life. And where the river of bliss through mist of heaven rolls over Elysian flowers her amber stream. With these that never fade, the spirits elect bind their resplendent locks enwreathed with beams, now in loose garlands thick thrown off, the bright pavement that like a sea of jasper shone, empurpled with celestial roses, smiled. Then, crowned again, their golden harps they took, harps ever turned, that glittering by their side, like quivers hung, and with preamble sweet, charming and waking raptures high. No voice exempt, no voice but will could join melodious part. Such concord is in heaven. The Father, first they sung, omnipotent, immutable, immortal, infinite, eternal King, the author of all being, fountain of light, thyself invisible amid the full blaze of thy beams, and through a cloud drawn round about thee like a radiant shrine, dark with excessive bright skirts appear, yet dazzle heaven, that brightest seraphim approach not, but with both wings veil their eyes, saying all of creation first, begotten Son, divine similitude, in whose conspicuous countenance without cloud made visible, the Almighty Father shines, whom else no creature can behold. On thee impressed the effulgence of his glory abides, transfused on thee his ample spirit rests. He, heaven of heavens, and all the powers therein, by thee created, and by thee thrown down. Revelation 4 and 10. Amaranth, a flower of a purple velvet color, which, though gathered, keeps its beauty, and when all other flowers fade, recovers its luster by being sprinkled with a little water. We frequently see grass and weeds and flowers growing underwater, and we may therefore suppose the finest flowers to grow at the bottom of the or them sometimes to water them. Okay, clearly the internet is disturbed with my reading. All right. The aspiring dominations, thou that day thy father's dreadful thunder didst not spare, nor stop thy flaming chariot wheels that shook heaven's everlasting frame, while over the next thou drovest o'er warring angels disarrayed. Back from pursuit thy powers with loud acclaim, thee only extolled, son of thy father's might, to execute fierce vengeance on his foes. Not so on man, him through their malice fallen, Father of mercy and grace, thou didst not doom so strictly, but much more to pity incline. No sooner did thy dear and only Son perceive thee purpose not to doom frail man so strictly, but much more to pity inclined, he to appease thy wrath, and in the strife of mercy and justice in thy face discerned, regardless of the bliss wherein he sat second to thee, offered himself to die for man's offense. O unexampled love, love nowhere to be found less than divine. Hail, Son of God, Savior of men. Thy name shall be the copious matter of my song henceforth, and never shall my harp thy praise forget, nor from thy Father's praise disjoin. Thus they in heaven above the starry sphere their happy hours enjoy in hymning spent meanwhile upon the firm opacous globe of this round world, whose first convex divides the luminous inferior orbs enclosed from chaos and the inroad of darkness old. Satan the lighted walks, a globe far off it seemed, now seems a boundless continent, dark, waste, and wild, under the frown of night, starless, exposed, and ever-threatening storms of chaos blustering round inclement sky, save on that side which from the wall of heaven, though distant far, some small reflection gains of glimmering air, less vexed with tempest loud. Here walked the fiend at large and spacious field, as when a vulture on Imis bred, whose snowy ridge the roving Tartar bounds, dislodging from a region scarce of prey, to gorge the flesh of lambs or yearling kids. Thee and thee only, supply than or but before he, Emmaus is a celebrated mountain in Asia. Its name signifies snowy in the language of the inhabitants. It is the boundary to the east of the Western Tartars, who are called roving, as they live chiefly in tents and remove from place to place for the convenience of pasturage, their herds of cattle and what they take in hunting being their principal subsistence. Ganges and Hydaspes are famous rivers of India, and Sirica is a region betwixt China to the east and the mountain of Emmaus to the west. On hills where flocks are fed, flies toward the springs of Ganges or Hydaspes, Indian streams, but in his way lights on the barren plains of Sarikana, where Chinese drive with sails and wind their canny wagons light. So on this windy sea of land, the fiend walked up and down alone, bent on his prey, alone, for other creature in this place, living or lifeless, to be found was none. None yet but store hereafter from the earth, up hither like aerial vapors flew, of all things transitory and vain. When sin with vanity had filled the works of men, both all things vain, and all who in vain things built their fond hopes of glory or lasting fame, or happiness in this or the other life. All who have their reward on earth, the fruits of painful superstition and blind zeal, not seeking but the praise of men, here find fit retribution, empty as their deeds. All the unaccomplished works of nature's hand, abortive, monstrous, or unkindly mixed, dissolved on earth, fleet, fleet hither and in vain, till final dissolution, wander here, not in the neighboring moon, as some have dreamed those argent fields more likely habitants, translated saints or middle spirits, hold betwixt the angelical and humankind. Hither of ill-joined sons and daughters, born first from the ancient world, those giants came with many a vain exploit, though then renowned. The builders next of Babel on the plain of Shinar, and still with vain design new Babels. Had they wherewithal would build, others came single. He who to be deemed a god leaped fondly into Etna flames, empedocles, and he who to enjoy Plato's Elysium leaped into the sea, Cleombrotus, and many more too long. Or no, that was Shinar. The scholar of Pythagoras, a philosopher and poet born of Agrigentum in Sicily, he wrote of the nature of things in Greek as Lucretius did in Latin verse. He, stealing one night from his followers, threw himself into the flaming Etna, that being nowhere to be found, he might be esteemed to be a god and to be taken up into heaven. But his iron patents being thrown out by the fury of the burning mountain, discovered his defeated ambition and ridiculed his folly. The name is rightly placed the last word in the sentence, as Empedocles was before. He was called Ambratiota of Ambracia, a city of Epirus in Greece. Having read over Plato's book of the soul's immortality and happiness in another life, he was so ravished with the account of it that he leaped from a high wall into the sea that he might immediately enjoy it. Immorios and idiots, eremites and friars, white, black, and gray, with all their trumpery. Here pilgrims roam that strayed so far to seek in Golgotha him dead who lives in heaven. And they who to be sure of paradise drying put on the weeds of Dominic, or in Franciscan think to pass disguised. They pass the planet seven and pass the fixed, and that crystalline sphere whose balance weighs the trepidation talked, and that first moved. And now St. Peter at heaven's wicket seems to wait them with his keys, and now at foot of heaven's ascent they lift their feet, when lo, a violent crosswind from either coast blows them traverse 10,000 leagues airy into the devious air. Then might ye see cowls, hoods, and habits with their wearers tossed and fluttered into rags. Then relics, beads, indulgences, dispenses, pardons, bulls, the sport of winds. All these upwhirled aloft fly over the backside of the world, far off into a limbo, large and broad, since called the paradise of fools, to few unknown long after, now unpeopled and untrod. All this dark globe the fiend found as he passed, and long he wandered, till at last a gleam of dawning light turned thitherward in haste his travelled steps. Far distant he descries, ascending by degrees magnificent up to the wall of heaven, a structure high at top whereof, but far more rich appeared the work as of a kingly palace gate, with frontispiece of diamond and gold embellished. Thick with sparkling orient gems the portal shone, inimitable on earth by model, or by shading pencil drawn. The stairs were such as whereon Jacob saw angels ascending and descending, bands of guardians bright, when he from Esau fled to Padanaram in the field of Luz. Dreaming by night under the open sky, and waking cried, "This is the gate of heaven." Each stair mysteriously was meant, nor stood there always, but drawn up to heaven sometimes viewless, and underneath a bright sea flowed of jasper, or of liquid pearl, whereon who after came from earth, sailing arrived. He speaks here according to the ancient astronomy adopted and improved by Ptolemy. wafted by angels, or flew over the lake wrapped in a chariot drawn by fiery steeds. The stairs were then let down, whether to dare the fiend by easy ascent or aggravate his sad exclusion from the doors of bliss, direct against which opened from beneath just over the blissful seat of paradise. A passage down to the earth, a passage wide, wider by far than that of after times, over Mount Zion, and though that were large, over the promised land to God so dear, by which to visit off those happy tribes on high, behest his angels to and fro, past frequent, and his eye with choice regard from Peneus, the fount of Jordan's flood, to Beer-Saba, where the Holy Land borders on Egypt and the Arabian shore. So wide the opening seemed, where bounds were set to darkness, such as bound the ocean wave. Satan from hence, now on the lower stair, that scaled by steps of gold to heaven's gate, looks down with wonder at the sudden view of all this world at once, as when a scout through dark and desert ways with peril gone all night, at last by break of cheerful dawn obtains the brow of some high climbing hill, which to his eye discovers unaware the goodly prospect of some foreign land first seen, or some renowned metropolis, with glistening spires and pinnacles adorned, which now the rising sun gilds with his beams. Such wonder seized, though after heaven seen, the spirit malign, but much more envy seized. At sight of all this world beheld so fair, round he surveys, and well might, where he stood so high above the circling canopy of night's extended shade. From eastern point of Libra to the fleecy star that bears Andromeda, far off Atlantic seas, beyond the horizon. Then from pole to pole he views in breadth, and without longer pause, downright into the world's first region, formerly called Dan, from Dan to Beersheba, being the limits of the Holy Land from north to south. He surveys from eastern point of Libra, one of the 12 signs exactly opposite to Aries, to the fleecy star, Aries, or the ram that is from east to west, for when Libra rises in the east, Aries sets full west, and Aries is said to bear Andromeda, because that constellation represented as a woman is placed just over Aries, and therefore when Aries sets, he seems to bear Andromeda far off Atlantic seas, the great western ocean beyond the horizon. His flight precipitant, and wins with ease through the pure marble air his oblique way amongst innumerable stars, that shone stars distant, but nigh hand seemed other worlds. Or other worlds they seemed, or happy isles, like those Hesperian gardens famed of old, fortunate fields and groves and flowery vales, thrice happy isles, but who dwelt happy there he stayed not to inquire. Above them all, the golden sun, in splendor, like as heaven, allured his eye. Thither his course he bends through the calm firmament, but up or down, by center or eccentric, hard to tell, or longitude, where the great luminary, aloof, the vulgar constellations thick, that from his lordly eye keep distance due, dispenses light from far. They, as they move their starry dance in numbers that compute days, months, and years, towards his all cheering lamp, turn swift their various motions, or are turned by his magnetic beam that gently warms the universe, and to each inward part with gentle penetration, though unseen, shoots invisible virtue even to the deep. So wondrously was set his station bright. There lands the flend, a spot like which perhaps astronomer in the sun's lucent orb through his glazed optic tube yet never saw. The place he found beyond expression bright, compared with aught on earth, metal or stone, not all parts like, but all alike informed with radiant light, as glowing iron with fire. If metal, Part seemed gold, part silver clear, if stone, carbuncle most, or chrysolite, ruby or topaz to the 12 that shone in Aaron's breastplate, and a stone besides imagined rather often elsewhere seen, that stone, or like to that, which here below philosophers in vain so long have sought. In vain, though, by their powerful art they bind volatile Hermes and call up unbound in various shapes old Proteus from the sea, drained through a limbic to his native form. What wonder, then, if fields and regions here breathe forth elixir pure and rivers run portable gold, when with one virtuous touch the archchemic sun, so far from us remote, produces with terrestrial humor mixed here in the dark so many precious things of color, glorious and effect so rare. Here, here matter new to gaze, the devil met undazzled. Far and wide his eye commands. For sight, no obstacle found here, nor shade, but all sunshine, as when his beams at noon culminate from the equator, as they now shot upward still direct, whence no way round shadow from body opaque can fall. And the air, nowhere so clear, sharpened his visual ray to objects distant far, whereby he soon saw within ken a glorious angel stand, the same whom John saw also in the sun. His back was turned, but not his brightness hid. Of beaming sunny rays, a golden tiara circled his head, nor less his locks behind illustrious on his shoulders, fledged with wings, lay waving round. On some great charge employed he seemed, or fixed in cogitation deep. Glad was the spirit impure, as now in hope to find who might direct his wandering flight to paradise, the happy seat of man, his journey's end, and our beginning woe. But first he cast to change his proper shape, which else might work him danger or delay. And now a stripling cherub he appears, not of the prime, yet such as in his face youth smiled celestial, and to every limb suitable grace diffused. So well he feigned under a coronet his flowing hair in curls on either cheek played. Wing he wore of many a colored plume sprinkled with gold. His habit fit for speed, secant and held before his descent steps a silver wand. He drew not nigh unheard, the angel bright, ere he drew nigh his radiant visage turned, admonished by his ear, and straight was known the archangel Uriel, one of the seven who in God's presence, nearest to his throne, stand ready at command, and are his eyes that run through all the heavens, or down to the earth, bear his swift errands. Over moist and dry, over sea and land, him Satan thus accosts. Uriel, for thou of those seven spirits that stand in sight of God's high throne, gloriously bright, the first art wont his great authentic will, interpreter through highest heaven to bring where all his sons thy embassy attend. And here art likeliest by supreme decree, like honor to obtain, and as his eye, to visit oft this new creation round. Unspeakable desire to see and know all these his wondrous works, but chiefly man, his chief delight and favor, him for whom all these works so wondrous he ordained, hath brought me from the choirs of cherubim alone, thus wondering. Brightest seraph, tell in which of all these shining orbs hath man his fixed seat, or fixed seat hath none, but all these shining orbs his choice to dwell, that I may find him, and with secret gaze or open admiration him behold, on whom the great Creator hath bestowed worlds, and on whom hath all these graces poured, that both in him and all things, as is meet, the universal Maker we may praise, who justly hath driven out his rebel foes to deepest hell, and to repair that loss created this new happy race of men to serve him better. Wise are all his ways. So spake the false dissembler unperceived, for neither man nor angel can discern hypocrisy. The only evil that walks invisible except to God alone, by his permissive will through heaven and earth, and oft, though wisdom wakes, suspicion sleeps at wisdom's gate, and to simplicity reigns her charge. While goodness thinks no ill where no ill seems, which now for once beguiled Uriel, though regent of the sun, and held the sharpest sighted spirit of all in heaven, who to the fraudulent impostor foul in his uprightness answer thus returned. Fair angel, thy desire, which tends to know the works of God, thereby to glorify the great workmaster, leads to no excess that reaches blame, but rather merits praise the more it seems excess. That led thee hither from thy imperial mansion thus alone, to witness with thine eyes what some perhaps contended with report, here only in heaven, for wonderful indeed are all his works, pleasant to know, and worthy is to be all had in remembrance, always with delight. But what created mind can comprehend their number, or the wisdom infinite that brought them forth, but hid their causes deep? I saw when at his word the formless mass, this world's material mold, came to a heap. Confusion heard his voice, and wild uproar stood vast infinitude confined, till at his second bidding darkness fled, light shone, and order from disorder sprung. Swift to their several quarters hastened then the cumbrous elements, earth, flood, air, fire, and this ethereal quintessence of heaven flew upward, spirited with various forms that rolled orbicular and turned to stars numberless as thou seest, and how they move. Each had his place appointed, each his course, the rest in circuit walls this universe. Look downward on that globe, whose hither side with light from hence, though but reflected, shines. That place is earth, the seat of man. That light his day, which else as the other hemisphere, night would invade. But there the neighboring moon, so called that opposite fair star, her aid timely interposes, and her monthly round still ending, still renewing through mid heaven. With borrowed light her countenance triform hence fills and empties to enlighten the earth, and in her pale dominion checks the night. That spot to which I point is paradise, Adam's abode, those lofty shades his bower. Thy way thou canst not miss, me mine requires. That thus said he turned, and Satan, bowing low, as to superior spirits is wont in heaven, where honor due and reverence none neglects, took leave, and toward the coast of earth beneath, down from the ecliptic, sped with hoped success, throws his steep flight in many an airy wheel, nor stayed till on Nephates' top he lights. Increasing with horns toward the east, decreasing with horns the west, and at the full, a mountain in the borders of Armenia, not far from the spring of Tigris. The poet lands Satan on this mountain because it borders on Mesopotamia, in which the most judicious describes of paradise place it. And that is the end of the third book. We're going to leave it there and be back for book 4, The Argument. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Peace.